It's over, Jack. My new lover is taking me to Paris. That's what my wife Sarah told me, right there in the middle of a crowded Manhattan steakhouse, the same place I once proposed to her. Candles glowing, jazz in the background, and she drops a bomb on our marriage like she's ordering dessert. Now, most men would have lost it, raised their voice, slammed the table, maybe begged for answers. Not me. I lifted my glass of Cabernet, took the slowest sip of my life, and said 3 simple words: enjoy your flight. I could see the confusion flash across her face. She wanted tears. She wanted drama. But calm? She didn't know how to handle that. What she also didn't know, what made me smile inside, was the truth. The so-called lover she was running away with wasn't a rich European, wasn't some powerful stranger. No, he was Ryan Cooper, my 24-year-old intern. And that's when the real story began. My name's Jack Miller, 42 years old, senior partner at a mid-sized investment firm in New York City. To most people, I'm the guy who wears the tailored suits, drives the German sedan, and closes million-dollar deals before lunch. Respectable, reliable, solid. For years, I thought I had it all figured out. Career on the rise, a brownstone apartment I actually owned, and a wife who turned heads at every company gala. I worked the long hours, paid the bills, and believed the picture we were painting together was one of stability, success, and partnership. Funny thing about pictures, though, sometimes they're just illusions hung up on the wall. Behind the frame, the cracks start showing, and if you ignore them long enough, the whole damn thing collapses in your hands. Back then, I didn't realize my perfect life was already unraveling. But looking back, the signs were everywhere. Sarah and I had been married for almost 10 years. To the outside world, we looked like the kind of couple you'd see in a glossy magazine ad for luxury watches. Me in a sharp suit, her in a cocktail dress, both smiling like life was effortless. Friends used to say we were the perfect match. Even my colleagues envied the way she'd light up a room at firm events, hanging on my arm as if we had it all. And for a long time, I believed it. Sunday mornings with coffee and the Times, vacations in the Hamptons, dinner parties where she'd tell our story like it was some modern fairy tale. I thought those moments meant something real. But here's the thing. Perfection is often just good staging. Behind the carefully curated smiles, the truth was darker. I mistook comfort for connection, loyalty for love. And Sarah, she was already looking for an exit. We lived on the Upper West Side, in one of those brownstones people stop to photograph on Sunday walks. Brick facade, black iron railing, a front stoop that looked like it belonged in a romantic comedy. Inside, it was every bit the American dream. Polished hardwood floors, stainless steel kitchen, shelves lined with wine from trips we'd taken together. Our mornings had a rhythm. I'd lace up for a quick jog through Central Park before heading downtown to the office. Sarah would glide into the kitchen in her robe, sipping almond milk lattes and scrolling Instagram as if it were a full-time job. Evenings were dinner reservations, charity galas, or the occasional Netflix night when she felt like keeping it simple. It all looked picture perfect. But here's the part no one saw. A home can be spotless and still feel empty. You can sleep beside someone every night and still be alone. There's this steakhouse in Midtown, mahogany walls, dim lights, waiters in crisp white jackets. Morton's, Del Frisco's. Pick your poison. It's that kind of place. It wasn't just any restaurant for me and Sarah. It was our place. The spot where I dropped to one knee, slid a ring onto her finger, and thought I was sealing a lifetime promise. We'd gone back for anniversaries, promotions, even the occasional just because dinner. Every time I walked through those doors, it reminded me of that night. Her tears, the applause from nearby tables, the way I believed she was my forever. So when she suggested we meet there last Friday, I didn't question it. I thought maybe she wanted to reconnect, rekindle what we'd been losing. Instead, I walked into the most expensive stage for heartbreak I could have imagined. Funny thing, life has a twisted sense of humor. The same table where I once promised forever became the place she ended it. The night had all the trimmings of romance. Candles flickered on the white linen, jazz hummed low from the speakers, and the waiter hovered just far enough to keep the illusion of privacy. To anyone watching from another table, we probably looked like a couple celebrating something special. 2 glasses of red, a perfectly seared ribeye on its way. Picture perfect. But beneath the surface, the air was razor thin. Sarah kept twirling her wedding ring, tapping her manicured nails against the tablecloth like a drummer keeping time for a funeral march. She wouldn't meet my eyes, just glanced around the room, anywhere but me. I tried small talk. Work, friends, even a joke or two. Nothing landed. It was like speaking into a void, every word bouncing off her armor. My gut told me something was coming, something bigger than an argument. The steakhouse was dressed for love, but the stage was set for war. Sarah used to have this way of locking eyes with me, even in a crowded room. It was one of the things that first drew me in, like I was the only man that existed when she looked at me. But that night, it was gone. She studied the menu she already knew by heart. She adjusted her napkin like it was made of gold silk. She even counted the wine stains on the tablecloth from previous diners, anything to avoid looking directly at me. Her phone buzzed once, lighting up beside her glass, and she snatched it so fast you'd think it was a grenade. "Just work," she muttered, sliding it into her purse. But I saw the way her hand trembled. In that moment, the woman who used to laugh at my stupid jokes now acted like eye contact with me might turn her to stone. My fork hovered over my plate, and I knew the real conversation hadn't even started. Looking back, the signs had been flashing like neon lights. I just chose not to see them. Sarah had suddenly developed a busy social calendar, girls' nights that seemed to happen every other evening, always with some vague explanation about coworkers I'd never met. Her wardrobe changed too, dresses that belonged more on a runway than at a neighborhood wine bar. New perfume, subtle but expensive, the kind that lingers on your shirt long after a hug. Then there were the Netflix marathons. She'd gone from our usual comedies to foreign films with subtitles, French mostly. I'd find her on the couch at midnight, eyes glued to some black and white Parisian love story, scribbling notes like she was preparing for an exam. And those late-night calls? Always taken in the other room, voice lowered to a conspiratorial whisper. I told myself it was nothing, but deep down, I knew. Denial, after all, is the most comfortable prison a man can live in. It started small, a new handbag here, a boutique dress there. I didn't think much of it. She's always liked nice things, and I could afford them. But then it snowballed. Suddenly, every week there was a delivery box on our doorstep. Designer heels, silk blouses, jewelry that sparkled a little too loudly for casual dinners. Her mornings changed too. Instead of coffee and pajamas, she'd glide into the kitchen in full makeup, hair styled like she had a photo shoot scheduled. When I asked where she was off to, the answer was always vague. Brunch with friends, a gallery opening, a networking mixer. Even the way she spoke shifted. French phrases slipped into conversation, as if ordering croissants in a midtown cafe somehow made her European. The woman who once mocked pretension now wore it like a badge of honor. And me? I watched the transformation, convincing myself it was just a phase. Truth was, Sarah was already halfway gone. The phone calls were the hardest to ignore. At first it was little things. She'd step into the hallway when her phone buzzed, claiming it was a friend with girl problems. But soon, it turned into a routine. Dinner on the stove, phone rings, and suddenly Sarah is in the other room, voice lowered to a hush. I'd catch fragments when I walked by. Soft laughter, drawn-out pauses, the kind of tone you don't use for casual conversations. When I asked who it was, she'd wave it off. Just Jenna, or my sister needed advice. The excuses came quick, almost rehearsed. What really sealed it was the look on her face afterward. Flushed cheeks, distracted eyes, like she'd been somewhere else entirely. Sometimes she'd rejoin me on the couch, but her mind was still on that call. I told myself not to press, not to seem paranoid. But deep down, I knew those weren't conversations meant for a husband to overhear. Sarah had always loved the occasional evening with her friends. Wine bars, dinner, maybe a late movie. That was normal. But suddenly, girls' night became her favorite phrase. Twice a week turned into 3, then 4. Some weeks, I saw her more dressed for the city than sitting across from me at dinner. She'd step out in heels that could break an ankle, a little black dress I'd never seen before, and that cloud of perfume that lingered long after the door closed. "Don't wait up," she'd say with a wink, as if I had a choice. At first I believed her. I wanted to. But there was no trace of these mysterious friends. No photos, no names, no casual mentions the next morning. Just vague stories and tired smiles. I'd ask, who was there? And she'd rattle off the same 2 names every time, like a script she didn't bother to update. And I realized I wasn't losing nights with my wife. I was losing her altogether. Denial is a hell of a drug, and I was hooked. Every late night, every suspicious smile, every dress that didn't look like it was bought for me, I filed it all away under "don't overthink it." I told myself she deserved freedom, that I was being the good husband by trusting her. After all, wasn't that what marriage was supposed to be? Trust? When my friends asked where Sarah was, I'd laugh it off. Out with the girls, I'd say, like it was no big deal. Even when the pit in my stomach grew heavier, I smothered it with excuses. She was stressed. She needed space. Maybe I was just imagining things. I was a master at lying. To myself. Because admitting the truth meant admitting the life I'd built was crumbling. And for a man like me who thrived on control, facing that reality was harder than believing a comforting lie. There are 4 words every married man dreads. We need to talk. They sound harmless on paper, but when they come out of your wife's mouth in that tone, measured, rehearsed, cold, you know you're not about to discuss weekend plans. Sarah said it halfway through dinner, her fork still resting on the appetizer she hadn't touched. Her voice was steady, but her eyes never left her wine glass. Jack, we need to talk. My chest tightened. I'd heard those words in movies, in office gossip, from friends going through divorces, and now they were aimed at me, point blank. I set down my knife, leaned back in my chair, and tried to keep my face neutral. I wanted to believe she was going to tell me something else, anything else. But deep down, I knew this wasn't about redecorating the house or planning a vacation. This was the prelude to something final. She didn't circle around it. No gentle build-up, no soft excuses about us growing apart. Just a clean cut straight to the jugular. It's over, Jack. The words hung in the air, heavier than the jazz floating from the speakers. My knife froze halfway to the steak, and for a second I wondered if I'd misheard her. But Sarah's expression told me otherwise. Calm, practiced, almost relieved to finally say it out loud. I waited for more, some explanation, but she wasn't interested in easing the blow. There was no, I still care about you, or we had good years, just the blunt finality of a woman who'd already moved on in her mind, and now wanted her body to catch up. Across the table, she looked like she'd just ordered dessert, not detonated a decade-long marriage. I sat there silent, my pulse steady but my world shifting. And that's when she added the real twist. She leaned forward, finally daring to meet my eyes, and delivered the line she'd clearly rehearsed in front of a mirror. My new lover is taking me to Paris. Not boyfriend, not someone I've been seeing. No, she chose lover, like she was the heroine in some paperback romance she picked up at an airport kiosk. Paris. Of course it was Paris. It couldn't be Cleveland or Denver. It had to be the city of lights, champagne, and cliches. The kind of destination you brag about on Instagram to prove your life is better than everyone else's. I just stared at her, almost amused by the theatrics. She wanted a scene, tears, yelling, maybe me storming out while other diners filmed on their phones. She was braced for fireworks. Instead, I reached for my glass, took a slow sip of Cabernet, and gave her 3 calm words. Enjoy your flight. Sarah blinked at me like she hadn't heard me correctly. She leaned back, waiting for the explosion, the red face, the raised voice, the inevitable scene. It never came. Her lips tightened, just slightly, and I caught the flicker of irritation in her eyes. She'd been ready for the drama, even hungry for it. The kind of meltdown she could later use as justification. See, Jack was always controlling, always angry. But instead she got a man who simply lifted his wine glass and refused to play her game. That threw her off balance. She shifted in her seat, searching for something. An emotional spark, a crack in the armor. All she found was composure. In that silence, I saw her disappointment. She wanted me broken, wanted the story to end with her walking out triumphant. But all she had was her big reveal falling flat against my indifference. And the truth was, she hadn't even heard the best part yet. As Sarah sat there, waiting for me to unravel, I almost laughed. Because while she thought she was dropping some earth-shattering secret, the truth was, I already knew. I'd known for weeks. Her mystery man wasn't some jet-setting entrepreneur or charming stranger from a gallery opening. No, he was Ryan Cooper, my intern. 24, fresh out of business school, still green enough to think cufflinks made him a professional. Every time she snuck off for her girls' nights, I saw the receipts. Every time she dressed like she was heading to a premiere, I knew exactly whose attention she was chasing. She thought she was clever, thought she'd fooled me. But I'd been piecing it together quietly, one subtle clue at a time. So when she said lover and Paris and all the rest, I didn't feel shock. I felt confirmation. She wasn't blindsiding me. She was just walking into a trap she didn't even know I'd already set. Ryan Cooper. 24 years old, fresh MBA from Wharton, walked into my office 3 months ago like he already owned the place. 6'2", perfectly styled hair that looked like it took more product than a runway model, and a smile that screamed trust fund baby. He was the kind of kid who thought a tailored Armani suit and a LinkedIn buzzword vocabulary were enough to crown him the next business prodigy. At first glance, he was charming. He remembered people's names, complimented the receptionist on her haircut, asked about coworkers' kids. It was textbook manipulation, and the sad part? Most of the office bought it. They saw ambition. I saw arrogance. He had this habit of walking into meetings with his chin high, nodding along like he was graciously approving everyone else's inferior ideas, the type who believed confidence could replace competence. And apparently, he also believed sleeping with the boss's wife was a smart career move. Ryan strutted around the office like he was auditioning for a Wall Street magazine cover, always in a suit that looked custom, slim cut, perfect lines, probably cost more than most of my staff's monthly rent. Matching cufflinks, Italian loafers polished to a mirror shine. He wasn't just dressed for success, he was dressed for attention, and he knew it. You could see it in the way he carried himself. Shoulders back, chin tilted just enough to suggest superiority without a word spoken. He'd stroll into a conference room late, flashing that slick smile, and somehow make people feel like he was the reason the meeting mattered. It was the kind of confidence that can only come from never having faced real consequences. The unshakable arrogance of a kid who'd coasted through life on charm and connections, convinced the world was just waiting to hand him the keys. Ryan didn't just think he belonged at the top, he thought he was born there. Ryan knew exactly how to play people. He'd breeze into the break room with that effortless grin, ask the interns about their classes, and laugh like he actually cared about their answers. He'd remember the name of someone's kid or compliment a manager on their innovative idea. Never mind that it was just common sense dressed up in buzzwords. To the untrained eye, he looked genuine. He asked about weekend plans, handed out compliments like candy, even brought in overpriced lattes for the team just because. Half the office thought he was some rising star, mature beyond his years, destined for greatness. What they didn't see was the calculation behind every word, the way his eyes flicked to the highest-ranking person in the room, always angling for proximity to power. It wasn't kindness, it was strategy. Ryan wasn't building relationships, he was building a ladder, and he didn't care who he stepped on or who he slept with to climb it. Ryan couldn't keep his mouth shut about money. Every Monday morning he'd stroll into the office bragging about some 5-star restaurant he'd just discovered, dropping the name like it was common knowledge. Nobu, Perse, Le Bernardin, places most interns couldn't afford to walk past, let alone eat in. He'd talk about weekends in the Hamptons, cigars at rooftop lounges, and networking over $1,000 bottles of scotch. When someone asked how he pulled it off on an intern's salary, he'd smirk and say, "Smart investments, multiple revenue streams." The kind of answer meant to sound impressive while explaining nothing. His Instagram was a highlight reel of luxury, first-class lounges, designer clothes, hotel lobbies with chandeliers bigger than most apartments. To his peers, it made him look successful. To me, it screamed fraud. No intern lives like that unless daddy's footing the bill, or unless they're using someone else's money. And in Ryan's case, I knew exactly whose money that was. I've always believed the fastest way to know a man's character is to give him responsibility and see what he does with it. So when Ryan had been strutting around like he was already partner material, I decided to test him. I pulled him into my office one morning, slid a shiny new corporate card across the desk, and told him he was on the fast track. I said all the right things. This is about trust, Ryan. Use it wisely. Don't make me regret it. He grinned like I'd just knighted him. What he didn't know was that I'd been watching. Every charge, every swipe, every so-called business expense would show up on my dashboard in real time. This wasn't a promotion. It was bait. Because if Ryan was the man I suspected he was, it wouldn't take long before that little piece of plastic became his downfall. And sure enough, it didn't. Ryan walked out of my office that day like he'd just been named partner. Chest out, handshake firm, flashing that smug grin to anyone who'd look. I could practically hear the story he'd be telling himself. Jack Miller trusts me. Jack sees my potential. I'm destined for bigger things. In his head, that card was a golden ticket. Access to clients, dinners, travel, proof that he was already climbing the corporate ladder faster than anyone else. He thought he'd earned it with charisma and hustle. But the truth? I wasn't elevating him. I was baiting him. I knew his ego was too big to resist temptation. The kid had no brakes, no sense of limits. Give him an inch and he'd sprint a mile, straight into the wall I'd already built. And as he strutted back to his desk, card gleaming in his wallet, I leaned back in my chair with one thought. Go ahead, Ryan. Show me who you really are. It didn't take long. Within 2 weeks, the unusual charges started rolling in. At first, he tried to make them look legitimate. Client dinners, business meetings, the usual categories. But the restaurants he chose? Romantic French bistros in Soho, rooftop lounges in Tribeca, places you'd take a date, not a client. Then came the hotels. Late project work, he labeled them. Except they weren't business hotels near the office. They were boutique spots in Midtown, the kind that charge by the experience, not the hour. I sat in my office, scrolling through the expense system, watching his arrogance in real time. He didn't even try to cover his tracks. No fake invoices, no creative justifications, just swipes, as if he believed nobody would dare question the golden boy. To the rest of the firm, Ryan looked like he was thriving. To me, he looked like a thief who'd just handed me the rope to hang him with. The expense logs read like a fine dining tour of Manhattan. Le Cuckoo, 11 Madison Park, a rooftop champagne bar in Chelsea. Each charge tucked neatly under client entertainment. But I knew better. No client dinners ran past midnight. No business meeting required a candlelit table for two and a $400 bottle of Bordeaux. He wasn't wining and dining prospects. He was wining and dining my wife, on my company's dime. I pictured them sitting across from each other, Sarah laughing at his recycled MBA jokes, Ryan leaning in like he'd earned the world, and all the while, every swipe was feeding into my system, time-stamped, documented, undeniable. Most men would have been furious. I wasn't. I was curious. Curious how far he'd go, how arrogant he'd become before the fall. And as I watched the receipts pile up, one thing became clear. Ryan wasn't just stealing money. He was writing his own confession, one lavish dinner at a time. Next came the hotel charges. They popped up on the expense sheet like neon signs. The Peninsula, the Langham, the Bowery. Not business hotels near client offices, but luxury escapes in the heart of Manhattan, the kind that market themselves with rooftop views and designer linens. He labeled them overnight project stays. Cute. As if my firm had suddenly started renting suites with rainfall showers and champagne minibars to crank out spreadsheets. The timestamps told the real story. Friday nights, Saturday evenings, holidays. Not the hours of a dedicated intern grinding through late-night deadlines, but the hours of a man playing house with a married woman. My wife. Each charge was a breadcrumb, leading me right to their affair. But instead of confronting Sarah or blowing up at Ryan, I just saved the receipts. Let him believe he was untouchable. Let her believe she was upgrading. Every swipe was another nail in their coffin, and I was in no rush to close the lid. By the third week, I had more than enough to see the pattern. The French bistros, the rooftop champagne, the luxury hotel suites, all of it lined up like dominoes waiting to fall. One charge alone might have been explained away. A client dinner here, a late project there. But together, it was a neon billboard flashing fraud. I started printing out the statements, highlighting dates, matching receipts with Sarah's mysterious nights out. It was almost laughable how perfectly the timelines overlapped. Friday, girls' night? That same evening, Ryan's card showed a $900 dinner in Soho. Saturday, brunch with the girls? Another $700 at the Bowery Hotel. Piece by piece, the story wrote itself. Ryan wasn't just reckless, he was sloppy. He thought charm made him untouchable, that the rules didn't apply. And Sarah? She thought she'd found a secret escape. What neither of them realized was that I was watching the whole movie play out, frame by frame. The longer it went on, the bolder they became. Sarah stopped pretending her nights out were rare treats. Now they were routine. She'd dress to kill, heels clicking down the stairs, lips painted red like she was heading to a movie premiere. She barely bothered with excuses anymore. And Ryan? He strutted around the office like he was already partner. He'd drop little comments in meetings, references to French cuisine, weekend getaways, knowing nobody would question him. Nobody except me. I even caught them once in the lobby of my building. She in a cocktail dress, him in that over-tailored Armani suit, laughing too closely, standing too comfortably. They didn't see me. At least, I don't think they did. But that moment told me everything. They thought they were untouchable. They thought I was blind. But arrogance has a way of loosening tongues and lowering guards. And every slip they made only confirmed what I already knew. Their downfall was coming, and I'd be the one holding the match. What made it almost funny was how convinced they were that I didn't have a clue. Sarah would come home from one of her girls' nights, toss her heels by the door, and act like everything was perfectly normal. She'd hum French songs while unpacking shopping bags, never realizing I could trace every dollar back to Ryan's card. At the office, Ryan was no different. He'd nod at me in the hall, flash that cocky smile, and pitch ideas in meetings like he was already running the firm. Not a flicker of guilt on his face. He actually believed he was pulling one over on me, the senior partner who signed his checks. They were living their fantasy, thinking I was some clueless husband too busy with spreadsheets to notice. In reality, I had a front row seat to their performance. And the best part? I wasn't just watching. I was planning the curtain call. People expect a man in my shoes to break down, rage, heartbreak, sleepless nights. But me? I felt none of that. No tears. No screaming into pillows. Just curiosity. It was like watching a case study unfold. Two people convinced they were brilliant, rewriting the rules, when in reality, they were just rats in a maze I'd already mapped out. Every expense, every lie, every late-night whisper, data points on a chart I was quietly building. I poured bourbon at night, opened my laptop, and observed. Not as a husband nursing betrayal, but as a scientist cataloging specimens. Sarah with her faux Parisian airs, Ryan with his rookie arrogance. They were subjects, and I was the one taking notes. Funny thing is, that detachment gave me strength. While they were high on adrenaline and secrecy, I was calm, deliberate, patient. And in war, patience is everything. They thought they were winning. I knew they were already finished. At home, the shift was impossible to miss. Sarah treated our bedroom like a departure lounge. Suitcases lined the bed, half-zipped, spilling with silk dresses and high heels that had never seen daylight in our marriage. She held scarves up to the mirror, tilting her head like she was auditioning for a Paris runway. I watched from the doorway, bourbon in hand, as she hummed some French tune she'd probably picked up from YouTube. She packed like a soldier on a mission, methodical, precise, except her war wasn't survival. It was reinvention. The irony? She moved through our house, the one I bought years before she came along, like it was a hotel she was checking out of. No glance back, no hesitation, just the determination of a woman convinced she was upgrading her life. I didn't stop her. I didn't argue. I simply observed. Because what she thought was a beginning, I already knew was the beginning of her end. That night, after Sarah zipped her last suitcase, I retreated to my study. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of traffic outside. I poured 3 fingers of Pappy Van Winkle, her least favorite bourbon, which made it taste even better, and sat at my desk. The glow of my laptop lit the room as I logged into our corporate expense system. It was an old habit of mine, double-checking budgets, but tonight wasn't about numbers. Tonight was about watching a slow-motion car crash unfold. The dashboard blinked to life, and there it was. Every dollar Ryan had stolen neatly categorized and time-stamped. Flights, hotels, dinners, his entire fantasy romance documented with the precision of an IRS audit. I leaned back, bourbon warming my chest, scrolling through the transactions like chapters of a novel only I knew the ending to. They thought they were being clever. What they didn't realize was that every swipe of that card was carving their own gravestone. The first charge that hit me like a spotlight was impossible to miss. 2 first-class tickets on Air France. $14,600, not business class. Not some bargain upgrade. No, Ryan had gone straight for the luxury cabin, champagne service and lie-flat beds, like he was a Fortune 500 CEO. The timestamp made it worse. He'd booked those tickets the very morning he sat through our quarterly budget meeting, nodding along like he cared about profit margins. I remembered his fake enthusiasm, his hollow, "Great point, Jack" comments, while in reality he was planning his little Parisian escapade. There it was, black and white, undeniable. Not just adultery, not just arrogance, fraud, theft, a betrayal that was now quantified down to the cent. I swirled my bourbon and almost laughed. While they toasted their cleverness at 30,000 feet, they had no idea their fairy tale was already unraveling, line item by line item, receipt by receipt. As I scrolled through the logs, the picture sharpened. Not only did I know where they were going, I knew exactly when. The charge for those Air France tickets carried a timestamp down to the minute. Their plane would lift off at 7 o'clock p.m. from JFK, non-stop to Charles de Gaulle. I pictured them gliding through the first-class lounge, Sarah in her designer heels, Ryan practicing French phrases under his breath, both of them drunk on the idea of escaping together. They probably thought they were the clever ones, running away to Paris like characters in a romance novel. But sitting in my study, bourbon in hand, I had something better than suspicion. I had proof. A real-time itinerary of their betrayal. Every click, every swipe, every detail was mine to see. And as I watched that digital trail unfold, one thought cut through everything else. I wouldn't stop them from boarding. I'd let them fly, straight into the storm I was preparing. By the time their plane taxied down the runway, I was already in position. In one browser window sat the expense reports, 20-plus pages of Ryan's stupidity. In another, the draft of his termination letter. One click and it would be sent. Subject line, "Immediate termination, gross misconduct." On my phone, I had the corporate card services hotline queued up. One call, and his plastic lifeline would vanish, declined at every terminal, voided at every hotel. No champagne, no luxury suite, no Parisian fantasy. Just panic at 30,000 feet when the reality of unlimited power collapsed into debt and disgrace. I leaned back, sipping bourbon, rehearsing the timing in my head like a conductor before a symphony. Flight status confirmed, draft ready, hotline waiting. Sarah thought she was boarding a fairy tale. Ryan thought he was ascending into success. What neither of them realized was that I was about to flip the switch and strand them both in their dream city with nothing but each other. I could picture it clearly, almost like I was there. Sarah rolling her brand new leather luggage across the polished floor of JFK, her heels clicking with every step, head held high like she was auditioning for a travel commercial. Beside her, Ryan with his tailored suit jacket draped over his arm, flashing that smug smile at the airline clerk, as if first-class travel was his birthright. They probably felt unstoppable. Boarding passes in hand, passports ready, champagne waiting in the lounge. To them, it wasn't just a flight. It was the beginning of their new life. A glamorous escape from the boring man Sarah thought I was, and the perfect victory lap for Ryan's inflated ego. What made it almost poetic was knowing the truth. The moment they settled into those lie-flat seats, sipping bubbly, their fantasy was already collapsing. Their check-in smiles were just the opening act of the disaster show I'd scripted for them. As the boarding gate opened, I could almost see it. Ryan striding forward, chest out, his boarding pass gripped like a trophy. For him, this wasn't just a flight, it was a victory lap. First-class cabin, luxury hotel waiting, my wife on his arm. He probably thought he'd outsmarted everyone, that this was the moment his life leveled up. Sarah followed, eyes glowing like a girl stepping into a fairy tale. In her head, she was already strolling along the Seine, sipping espresso at Parisian cafes, posting photos with captions in broken French. She wasn't just running away from me. She thought she was reinventing herself. Two narcissists in love with their own fantasies, buckling in for a flight they believed was destiny. Ryan vibrating with arrogance, Sarah wrapped in daydreams. And neither had the faintest idea that 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, their carefully scripted romance was about to implode, courtesy of the man they thought they'd left behind. Back in my study, the house silent, I refreshed the flight tracker on my laptop. Air France, 007. On time. Scheduled departure, 7 o'clock p.m. I watched the little airplane icon inch away from JFK, its digital path stretching across the Atlantic. Some men would have been pacing, consumed with anger. I wasn't. I was calm, almost serene, bourbon in hand, eyes fixed on that blinking dot. Because that dot wasn't just a plane, it was the fuse on the bomb I'd been quietly wiring for weeks. At 7:15, the tracker updated, departed, climbing to cruising altitude, showtime. My draft email was open in another window. My finger hovered over the send button, the corporate hotline queued on my phone. I imagined them settling into their first-class seats, toasting with champagne, Sarah's head on Ryan's shoulder. The perfect picture, the perfect lie. And I smiled, knowing the next notification they'd see wouldn't be about champagne, it would be about their world collapsing. At 7:20 p.m., the tracker confirmed what I'd been waiting for. Wheels up, climbing steady. That was my cue. I slid my bourbon to the side, pulled the laptop closer, and opened the draft I'd polished like a masterpiece. Subject line, immediate termination, gross misconduct. Body, Ryan, your internship is terminated effective immediately for fraud and breach of trust. Your corporate card has been canceled. Security will be waiting upon your return. Jack Miller, senior partner. I read it one last time, savoring the words like the final notes of a symphony. Then I pressed send. Somewhere above the Atlantic, Ryan's phone buzzed in his pocket. 1 second he was sipping champagne, basking in the glow of stolen luxury. The next, his career evaporated in a single notification. I leaned back, exhaled slowly, and raised my glass. The first domino had fallen. And the best part? Neither of them had even landed yet. With the email sent, I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. I picked up my phone and dialed the corporate card services emergency line, something I'd saved in my contacts for this very moment. The rep answered with the usual scripted politeness, but my tone left no room for delay. This is Jack Miller, senior partner at Miller & Hartwell. I need to report fraudulent charges and cancel an account immediately. I rattled off Ryan's card number from memory. First-class tickets, luxury hotel, cash withdrawals, every cent unauthorized. The rep's voice tightened as she typed. Understood, Mr. Miller. The card has been permanently canceled. Any pending reservations or holds will be voided within 15 minutes. 15 minutes. By the time their plane crossed into international airspace, every reservation, every meal, every ounce of their fantasy would dissolve. I thanked her, hung up, and let the silence settle. Ryan thought he was flying toward Paris. He was actually flying straight into checkmate. 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, somewhere between New York and Paris, Ryan's phone buzzed. He probably thought it was a routine update, a boarding confirmation, maybe a hotel reminder. Instead, glowing on that pristine iPhone screen was my message. Ryan, your internship is terminated effective immediately for fraud. Your corporate card has been canceled. Security will be waiting upon your return. I could almost see his face, the confident smirk draining away, pupils widening, his grip tightening on the glass of champagne until his hand shook. Sarah, leaning beside him, would notice. "What's wrong?" she'd ask. And for the first time, Ryan wouldn't have an answer. That one email was a guillotine blade, dropped clean and fast, no excuses, no way out. Just a notification that his glittering future had ended mid-flight, leaving him strapped into a luxury seat he no longer had the right to occupy. And back home, I toasted the silence. The storm was only beginning. Back in my study, the glow of the flight tracker reflected off my glass as I poured another finger of bourbon. Somewhere over the Atlantic, Ryan was unraveling, Sarah was demanding answers, and their Parisian dream was already turning into a nightmare. I didn't need to see their faces to know the chaos that email had caused. The sudden shift in Sarah's voice, the panic in Ryan's hands, the whispered argument in a cabin designed for peace. It was better than any movie playing on the in-flight screens. I raised my glass toward the little airplane icon inching across the map. My voice was steady, almost amused, as the words slipped out again, quiet but sharp as a knife. Enjoy your flight. Because that was all they had left now, the flight itself. By the time the wheels touched down in Paris, everything else would already be gone. They touched down in Paris like royalty, dragging designer luggage through Charles de Gaulle with the confidence of people who believed the city was theirs for the taking. A black cab whisked them to the Champs-Élysées, where the hotel lobby sparkled with marble floors and chandeliers dripping in gold. Sarah must have felt like she'd stepped into her dream. Ryan strutted to the check-in desk, handed over his card with a flourish, and waited for the clerk to fawn over him. Instead, the clerk frowned, tapped the keyboard, tried again, and then, politely but firmly, delivered the words they never expected. "I'm sorry, monsieur. The card has been declined. The reservation has been canceled." The color drained from Sarah's face. Ryan tried to argue, voice rising, insisting there was a mistake. But there was no mistake. The luxury suite was gone. Their fairy tale ended right there at the front desk, bags at their feet, humiliation setting in. When the desk clerk's patience wore thin, security was summoned. 2 men in tailored suits, not thugs, but the kind of polished professionals who made humiliation sting worse, approached with quiet firmness. Ryan tried to puff up, demanding they check again, waving his phone like proof of his imagined importance. Sarah clung to her handbag, cheeks flushed crimson, hissing at him to fix it. But rules are rules, and fraud is fraud. Within minutes, their designer luggage was rolled right back out the gilded doors. There they stood, 2 supposed sophisticates stranded on the Champs-Élysées, surrounded by glittering boutiques and couples snapping photos. To everyone else, they looked like tourists waiting for a cab. But inside, they were panicked children, their 5-star fantasy dissolved into cold Paris air. Sarah's stilettos clicked angrily against the pavement, Ryan fumbling with his phone. And for the first time, they realized Paris wasn't going to welcome them. Paris was going to spit them out. My phone buzzed with an international code I knew immediately. Paris. I let it ring twice before answering, bourbon in hand, voice calm. On the other end, Sarah tried to sound composed, her tone clipped and icy, like nothing was wrong. "Jack, there's been some kind of mistake. The hotel says our reservation was canceled. The card isn't working. Clearly, this is just a mix-up with your company's system. Call them. Fix it." Even in humiliation, she couldn't help herself, still giving me orders, still speaking as if I were her problem solver. Her arrogance hadn't cracked yet. She believed this was temporary, that with a few phone calls her Parisian dream would be restored. I listened in silence, sipping bourbon, almost smiling at how rehearsed she sounded. She wasn't asking, she was demanding, as if entitlement alone could rebuild the fantasy collapsing around her. But I knew the cracks were already forming. Pride doesn't last long when reality keeps closing in. The second call came less than an hour later. This time, Sarah didn't sound polished or in control. Her words tumbled out faster, sharper, laced with a strain she couldn't hide. "Jack, this isn't funny anymore. The card's declined everywhere we try. Restaurants, taxis, everything. Ryan's phone keeps buzzing with these emails about being fired, but that has to be some kind of mistake. We're stranded here with luggage, no hotel, no money. People are staring at us like we're criminals. Fix this, Jack. Please, just fix it." The veneer of confidence was gone. Her voice cracked on, "Please," that single word betraying the desperation she was trying to suppress. She still tried to demand, to control, but the panic was winning. I sat back, letting her words pour through the receiver, each one confirming that the trap had closed. Sarah was realizing what I'd known from the start. In Paris, surrounded by luxury she couldn't touch, she wasn't in control anymore. By the third call, Sarah's tone was frantic, but what caught my attention was the background noise. Airport announcements, hurried footsteps, and Ryan's voice, shaken, cracking, barely coherent. She tried to mask it, but I heard it clearly. Ryan was breaking down. The same intern who once strutted through my office like he owned it was now sitting on the floor of Charles de Gaulle, crying. Not the quiet kind either, the desperate, gasping kind that draws stares from strangers. Sarah hissed at him to pull it together, but her own voice trembled. Jack, he says his career is over. He says he'll never work in business again. He won't stop crying. People are filming us. Do you understand? This is humiliating. I pictured it perfectly. Ryan in his $1,000 suit, face buried in his hands, while Sarah clutched her designer bags like lifeboats. The golden boy wasn't golden anymore. He was just another kid who finally met consequences. It didn't take long for their humiliation to escape the airport. In the age of smartphones, nothing stays private. By the time Sarah called me again, I'd already seen the proof, grainy photos circulating online. There was Ryan, slumped against a column in Terminal 2, $1,000 suit wrinkled, face red and streaked with tears. Beside him, Sarah clutching her oversized designer bag, trying to shield her face from curious onlookers. Hashtags popped up faster than luggage on the carousel. Hashtag Paris meltdown. Hashtag first class to no class. People laughed in the comments. Memes were already being made. Two glamorous Americans who thought they were in a love story, now looking like broke tourists who'd lost everything but their luggage. Sarah's voice on the next call was venomous. Jack, do you have any idea what you've done? We're a joke. People are filming us, posting us. Fix this right now. But there was nothing to fix. Their perfect image had shattered, and the world was enjoying the spectacle. By the fourth day, the calls lost all their bite. Sarah's voice no longer carried arrogance, just exhaustion. Jack, I had to call my parents, she admitted, her tone flat, almost embarrassed. They wired us money for flights home. But it wasn't the triumphant return she'd imagined. No more first-class champagne, no lie-flat beds. Just two cramped economy seats in the back of a crowded overnight flight, wedged between crying babies and strangers. From Parisian fantasy to budget reality in 72 hours. Ryan, stripped of every ounce of pride, sat beside her like a ghost, silent, broken, avoiding her gaze. His meltdown was already circulating online, and the golden boy's image was gone for good. Sarah had dreamed of strolling the Champs-Élysées in luxury. Instead, she was shuffling through an airport boarding gate with economy boarding passes in hand, praying nobody recognized her from the viral photos. Their escape hadn't just failed. It had turned into the punchline of their own downfall. When their flight finally landed at JFK, Sarah didn't walk off the plane like a woman returning from Paris. She stumbled off like someone leaving a battlefield, makeup smudged, hair tangled, her designer clothes wrinkled from 18 hours in economy. But the real bruises weren't on the outside. They were waiting for her at home. Friends who once envied her glamorous life now whispered behind her back. The same women she used to flaunt her shopping trips to suddenly stopped answering her calls. Nobody wanted to be associated with the woman plastered across social media, crying with a disgraced intern in a Paris airport. Even her neighbors looked differently at her. I'd catch the sideways glances, the murmured gossip when she walked by. Sarah, who once thrived on appearances, now lived in the shadow of her own humiliation. She thought Paris would elevate her. Instead, it had stripped her bare, leaving her reputation in ruins and her circle of friends gone. Ryan's return to the States wasn't just humiliating, it was terminal. By the time his economy flight touched down, word had already spread through every boardroom in New York. The golden boy intern had been caught committing fraud on a partner's watch, and corporate America has a long memory for sins like that. HR departments talk, law firms whisper, investment banks pass names like warnings, and Ryan's name was everywhere. Within a week, he was on every blacklist that mattered. Goldman wouldn't touch him. Morgan wouldn't even interview him. Consulting firms, hedge funds, even second-tier boutiques, doors slammed shut before he could knock. To his peers, he'd once been the rising star. Now he was a cautionary tale, the case study professors pulled up in class slides. Here's what happens when arrogance meets fraud. The Armani suits were still hanging in his closet, but no office would ever welcome him again. Ryan Cooper wasn't just fired, he was finished. Ryan tried to fight it at first. He polished his resume, swapped out his LinkedIn headline, and marched into interviews wearing the same smug grin he once flaunted in my office. But no amount of tailoring could hide the stain on his record. Everywhere he went, the answer was the same. Thank you for your time, Mr. Cooper, but we've decided to move forward with other candidates. Polite, professional, and final. Some firms didn't even bother with an interview. His name alone was enough to end the conversation. Within weeks, He'd gone from promising MBA graduate to a walking red flag. Corporate recruiters passed him over like he didn't exist. Word of his fraud had spread faster than he could update his cover letters. The truth was brutal. His career hadn't just hit a roadblock. It had ended before it began. At 24, Ryan Cooper was already a has-been, exiled from the very world he thought he was destined to rule. Back in New York, Sarah couldn't outrun the whispers. It started with her own family, half-concerned, half-judgmental phone calls. Her mother asked why she hadn't stayed in Paris longer, her father muttered about poor choices, and cousins traded stories behind her back. Everyone knew more than she thought they did. Then came the neighbors. The same ones who once complimented her designer outfits and envied her vacations now lowered their voices as she passed. I'd catch the sideways glances, the smirks barely hidden. To them, she wasn't Sarah the successful wife anymore. She was Sarah, the woman who ran off with the intern and came back in coach. Even mundane places turned cruel. At the grocery store, the cashier gave her that look of recognition. At the salon, the stylists whispered until she stopped booking appointments altogether. Her world, once polished and perfect, had shrunk to a cage of shame. Paris was supposed to be her rebirth. Instead, it became the scandal everyone else dined out on. It didn't take long for the final humiliation to land. Sarah packed what was left of her designer wardrobe into boxes and left New York behind. Not for Paris, not for some glamorous new life, but for her parents' modest house in suburban Ohio. The same home she'd once mocked for its floral curtains and outdated kitchen now became her refuge. She slept in her old childhood bedroom, walls still painted a faded pink, a relic of who she'd been long before she reinvented herself. The woman who used to sip Bordeaux in Manhattan steakhouses now ate meatloaf at her mother's dinner table. The social butterfly who once posted photos from rooftop lounges was back to grocery shopping at Target, head down to avoid stares. Her descent wasn't just financial, it was personal. Sarah hadn't just lost her marriage. She'd lost the image, the lifestyle, the audience she'd built her world around. And all she had left was the quiet shame of going backwards. While Sarah unpacked boxes in Ohio, I threw myself into work with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Without her constant complaints and distractions, the office became my arena, and I thrived in it. My portfolio, once stagnant under the weight of domestic chaos, started to surge. Deals closed faster, clients trusted me more, and I found myself actually enjoying the grind again. Within a quarter, my accounts grew 30%, a leap the partners couldn't ignore. Meetings that used to feel routine now carried energy. I wasn't weighed down by doubt or exhaustion. I was sharper, steadier, and it showed. Richard, my senior partner, even remarked during a review, "Jack, whatever you're doing differently, keep doing it. Your judgment has been flawless." Ironically, the betrayal that was supposed to break me had done the opposite. While Sarah spiraled into obscurity, I was building momentum, turning pain into progress and betrayal into leverage. For the first time in years, the house felt like mine. No more slammed doors, no passive-aggressive sighs, no background noise of constant dissatisfaction. Just silence, clean, calm, liberating. I woke up without alarms, brewed real coffee the way I liked it, and actually tasted my breakfast without commentary about carbs or superfoods. The gym became my sanctuary, not because I was chasing vanity, but because every rep, every mile, was for me, not for anyone else's approval. Evenings were no longer battles. I'd pour a bourbon, read what I wanted, business journals, biographies, even the occasional thriller, without defending my choices. The TV played sports without her dismissive remarks, or sometimes nothing at all. And in that quiet, I found something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Sarah had mistaken comfort for control, but stripped of her drama, my life expanded. Alone didn't mean lonely. Alone meant free. With Sarah gone, I stopped just surviving. I started rebuilding. The gym became a ritual, not a chore. Mornings began with weights. Evenings ended with cardio. I wasn't chasing a six-pack to post on Instagram. I was reclaiming the strength I'd let erode while keeping up with someone else's chaos. The mirror changed slowly. 15 pounds of lean muscle, shoulders broader, face sharper. My colleagues noticed. So did strangers. More important, I noticed. The man staring back at me wasn't tired anymore. He looked alive. Food stopped being a debate. No more overpriced kale smoothies or lectures about cleansing. I ate real meals, protein, vegetables, simple fuel my body thanked me for. I slept better, worked harder, and for the first time in a long time, I felt in control of myself. Sarah's Paris fantasy had collapsed. Mine was quieter but more powerful, a body, a mind, and a life that belonged entirely to me again. Somewhere along the line, during those years with Sarah, I'd misplaced myself. The man who once laughed too loudly at dumb jokes, who could turn a business setback into a funny story, had been buried under her endless criticisms. But living alone, I felt him return. I caught myself cracking jokes with my assistant Jennifer, the way I used to back in the early days. Even Marcus, my old college roommate, said over beers, "Jack, I haven't seen you this loose in years. You're actually funny again, not just trying to keep the peace." It hit me. I wasn't walking on eggshells anymore. I didn't have to filter my words, didn't have to perform for someone who'd already written me off. I could just be me. And that me was lighter, freer. A man who could close a deal in the morning, hit the gym at night, and still laugh at life in between. For the first time in a long time, I felt whole. Looking back now, I see it clearly. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is messy, fueled by anger and obsession. What I did was cleaner, sharper. It was accountability. Ryan thought he could cheat the system. Sarah thought she could cheat me. Both believed they were smarter, untouchable. But actions have consequences, and I simply made sure they faced theirs. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to chase. All I had to do was let the truth run its course and watch as their own arrogance destroyed them. So I'll ask you this. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you forgive, turn the other cheek? Or would you do exactly what I did? Because sometimes the most satisfying justice isn't loud. It's quiet, precise, delivered with 3 words they'll never forget. Enjoy your flight. Comment yes if you'd serve justice too.